Welcome to the CEO Hour with Dean Akers. The mission? To help CEOs and startups succeed in today's marketplace. Entrepreneur or established CEOs, is your business growing? Where's your business going? Let's talk about it with your host, Dean Akers.
Welcome to the CEO Hour. I'm your host, Dean Akers, bringing you top CEOs and entrepreneurs every week that share their journeys. This includes their thoughts and ideas that led to their success and, quite frankly, sometimes things they wish they didn't do or things they learned from not to do again. Today, I'd like to welcome Darwin Hale, the CEO of Advocate Health Advisors. Welcome, Darwin.
Thank you.
So, Darwin, our listeners out there, what they really are super interested in learning is your journeys. And because our goal is for them to leave with at least one idea through our visit that helped you along the way, or something you've learned, or an experience you had that was cool that they can relate to help them in their journeys. And so I always kind of started off pretty basic, which is October 18th, 1964. Can you explain what happened then?
Well, my memory is a little foggy, exactly. But as I would say, that's I was born here in not far, St. Petersburg. And shortly after that, I was raised in Ocala and spent the majority of my time in Ocala. My dad was a hotel manager, so we would travel to see him in summers and on weekends, or he would travel to see us. But generally, I was raised there. We had Hale's Mobile Ranch, what wasn't really a ranch at all. It was actually a trailer park. But I grew up there, went to a private school, which was a big deal. And then a public high school. So
what was the private school in Ocala?
It's called Blessed Trinity. It was a Catholic school, and it had 1st through 8th grade, and literally it was 1st through 8th grade. There weren't like 3 first grades, or there's 1 first grade, and I started there. I had lived in Miami a little bit, prior to that, before school started.
Well, you know what's always funny? Of course, you're a native Floridian for sure.
Born and raised.
And what's funny is Ocala is near and dear to myself. I'm 12 years older than you, but that was my first territory back in the day. And so I know every piece of Ocala.
Ah, okay.
And I did a lot of business up there and know a bunch of people. In fact, when we have lunch afterwards, I'm sure we'll connect up. Ocala has a very warm spot for me in my life.
Oh, did you happen to know Fred Wheeler by any chance?
I did know them.
Okay,
yeah.
There you go.
I knew the Craigs. Did you know any of those folks?
I did.
And so, yeah, Ocala, we'll have to tell stories about that. We could have a whole show on Ocala. People don't realize the impact of Ocala, nor do they realize the money that was up there in thoroughbred horse racing and stuff. And, with the farms up there.
It could be a combination of a leadership or a reality show. Depends which way you want to go with it.
Oh, yeah. Well, it definitely could be a reality show. But anyway, so you were born in St. Petersburg. You grew up in Ocala.
Yeah.
When you were in Ocala, tell me about your adventure in Ocala.
Well, that's a good question. So I was mostly working on the weekends, and got to grow up doing cool stuff with my dad. So we were always laying some concrete, because in a trailer park you have to have 2 slabs, one for the front, one for the car. Had to have water and sewer, which we dug and ran. I was the lawn guy, so I had my own lawn business. At I don't know, like 10. I can't remember how young I was, but always had access to my dad's tools, and could I used to charge $2.50 to cut your grass, and that did or didn't include weed eating, depending how it went. Weed eaters had just came out back then, so it was good. It was it seemed like a lot of work at the time, raking leaves, but getting to put the leaves on the trailer, drive it, make a big old pile of fire, having lots of woods behind us, having a go-kart and then a motorcycle. It was really great growing up. In hindsight, now I realize it was a lot better than I probably thought it was at the time.
Well, you and I probably have not only Ocala as a kindred spirit, but I was a young man, and my grandparents had a 60-acre from scratch mobile home park. Wow. And so I dug all the sanitary sewer lines.
Yeah.
I mowed the yards. We used prisoners, but so now this is like 6 degrees of separation of experience and stuff. So when you graduated from high school, where did your journey take you?
Well, so I went into the military, but I would say that one interesting point is that I had gone to Blessed Trinity Catholic School, and then in 8th grade I had to decide to go to St. John's, which was the private school, or to Forest. And Forest had like the leading football team in the state, and I wasn't very big, still not very big, thankfully. But the decision to go to the public school was like a pretty big deal, right? Because we came from very humble beginnings, and that was a real eye-opener for me, right? So there was a lot of civil unrest back then. There was a lot of stuff going on, and so going to that school really changed a lot of my views of the world. I got into weightlifting and sports, learned how athletes and the bond on athletes trump other groups, right? The car guys or these guys or that guys. So athletics and the teams that followed. And my accomplishments in the weightlifting world, were meaningful to me. And then I think that probably led to actually signing up for the military. And at 17, 2 weeks after high school, I was still 17 when I graduated because of October is my birthday. And so I shipped off to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and had two of the absolute meanest drill sergeants in the world, Sergeant Segro and LaRue. I still remember them vividly. And
have you Googled them to see where they are?
I have not, but I'm sure that although I remember them, they may not remember me. But in any event, yeah, Fort Knox, basic training, and that was quite the deal.
So that had to be a big deal because what made you, as a high school senior, because your parents had to sign your deal to get in, right?
They did, yeah.
What were your parents' military background?
My dad had served in World War II at the end in the Army Air Corps. I like to remind my Air Force friends that the Army gave birth to the Air Force just to get a rise out of them. But basically, my family is very patriotic, and my dad had served, and so he was okay with me serving. And it seemed like a good way to get ahead and to do some other things.
Yeah, but even then, that had to be a pretty big decision.
Yeah, especially when you couldn't sign for yourself, as you pointed out.
Yeah, and a lot and so now you go into basic and you have your two most favorite drill sergeants you ever met. In hindsight, did that help impact you in a good way, bad way, or just how'd that work out?
Well, I think it was a good way. I hadn't thought about any other impact, but there is a unique set of environmental circumstances that they put together there, and so you learn what you can do, and you kind of learn what you're made out of when you're put under that pressure. And I was an athlete in high school, so the physical piece wasn't as bad for me. It wasn't something that I worried about. I knew that I could do whatever they put in front of me because I was always just athletically, physically fit. But, doing it without sleep, doing it in a certain environment, and they were, Vietnam era guys. So they took it very serious. They had all been in, real brutal combat. And the whole train like you fight kind of thing, that really left an indelible impression on me. And they talked about guys doing the drills, fire and maneuver drills. And I remember peak deck, pull, roll, cocks, like how you get up and assault the objective. There were guys in Vietnam that were picking up their brass because they were trained to pick up the empty casings. So they were doing that in country. And they were like, don't do that. Here's how we do it. And that was a big deal.
Wow, that had to be back in when you were that age, you had to be going, what?
Yeah, that was a lot different than a sporting competition.
Yeah, that had to be very different. So you were in the Army. Where were you deployed?
Well, I've been deployed 7 times, but, mostly I spent time around Fort Bragg. I was originally MP. I went to Marion Military Institute in Alabama. They had a program one weekend at the basic training. I can't remember where it was, but basically you could see these guys. They treated you really nice on a Sunday, and I ended up going to a military junior college, getting my commission, which was made my parents very happy. I was the first officer and then later the first college graduate in my family. Found out later that neither one of my parents actually went to high school and graduated. My dad did go back to Cornell for a hotel management program, but that was a select program many years later. And so went on through Fort Bragg, was very instrumental. There's a lot of neat things there. But as a military police officer, I also spent time again in Alabama, and I was in Fort McClellan, Alabama, which is outside of Anniston, which is a pretty cool place. And so, again, I think that was good. As I look back, I think had I not been a military police, I might have been more akin to the criminal element, which I found later in special forces.
Well, when we come back into segment 2, we're going to pick up, Darwin, with that whole journey in the military, because it sounds like that was pretty defining too. We're moving into special ops and stuff like that, and different things you've done in the military police. Again, I'm the host, Dean Akers, every week bringing the CEO Hour. And I just want to remind our listeners, if you ever have a question that I can relay back out later, and or you want any information to help you out with our CEO physical or our three-circle sales program, all you have to do is reach out at help@adjunctco.com. That's help@adjunctco.com. And I want to remind you that this CEO Hour goes up every week as a podcast. So if you're listening to this and you want your friends to enjoy Darwin's journey or any of our other previous journeys, it's on the Adjunct CEO Hour podcast. So we'll be right back with segment 2.
The CEO Hour with your host, Dean Akers. Connect with Dean at deanakers.com. We'll be right back.
So, you're a tech startup. You're working hard, trying to make it happen with big ideas, big dreams, and a small budget. You need to connect with people in the same boat. Now is the time to join the early stage startup group, the Innovation Center, an incubator for early stage tech firms. You can find them at tbinnovates.com. Now operating for over 14 years, the Innovation Center is a regional, national, and internationally known success story, continuing to generate momentum in Pinellas County. Twice, the Innovation Center has won the Tampa Bay Technology Forum's Excellence in Service Award and has been recognized by Entrepreneur.com as a top 10 international business incubator. And now, Tech Garage, a technology and entrepreneurship center, has joined forces with the Innovation Center to provide a co-working program in downtown St. Petersburg. Connect with the startup community. Connect with the Innovation Center. Go to tbinnovates.com. That's tbinnovates.com. And tell them the Adjunct CEO sent you.
If you're a CEO or organizational leader looking to expand your business, join the CEO Council, where you'll meet and exchange ideas with fellow CEOs without the pressures of a sales network environment. You can join today by sending an email to application@adjunctceo.com. The CEO Council is comprised of over 220 fantastic local business leaders you'll be able to learn from because they walk in your shoes every day. When you become a member of the CEO Council, you'll have an opportunity to build trusted relationships during the roundtable meetings, share your triumphs, vet ideas, and work through business challenges with peers who can provide real-world business solutions. The CEO Council offers opportunities to hear from world-renowned speakers that inspire ideas to help members grow as both leaders and individuals. Join the CEO Council. Request your CEO Council membership application today at adjunctceo.com or by sending email to application@adjunctceo.com. That's application@adjunctceo.com.
Helping your business succeed in today's marketplace. Welcome back to the CEO Hour with Dean Akers.
Well, welcome back to segment 2 as we continue our visit with Darwin Hale, the CEO of Advocate Health Advisors. Again, I'm your host, Dean Akers, each week bringing you top CEOs and entrepreneurs that share their journeys, thoughts, and ideas that helped in their success and things they may or may not have done, would like to do again. Darwin was sharing with us as his venture into the Army and the military police. So now you're how impressive is that to join the Army as enlisted and to go on and do the steps to become an officer?
Well, I would like to think that it is, but I have to be honest. I initially went because it was a Sunday afternoon off from the chores, and they gave you a chance to go check it out. So, in some ways I wasn't as focused as maybe I am now, but it did lead me down a path, and I did complete all the required tasks to get down that path.
Well, but so when you enlisted, did you enlist? And they said, oh, you're going to get to go to officer candidate school because of your grades when you enlisted or something?
No. I took the ASVAB, the battery for skills, and I signed up. I was initially thinking I would be an armor officer, and I wanted to drive a tank, and I wanted to fly jets. Quite frankly, I thought that would be cool. And I'm colorblind, and so I didn't have the vision to be a fighter pilot. I saw every John Wayne movie. I saw like all that stuff. So since I couldn't do that, I thought, that might be a better way. But it was an easy transition, and they counted my basic training as military science 1 and 2. And in this early commissioning program, I basically was 19. I was a second lieutenant, 12 May 84. And so now I'm like 19, I'm a second lieutenant, and I have an AA degree, and I'm like dangerous, right? Because I don't know anything, and I feel like I know something.
Well, no, at the time you probably thought you were bulletproof, smartest guy in the room or something.
And I might have been.
You probably were. Exactly. That's part of the DNA, isn't it?
It is.
So now you're a second lieutenant, you're 19 years old. What happens?
Well, like I said, I went to my officer basic and advanced courses, and when I got to my unit, to my platoon, I had some really good senior non-commissioned officers, which throughout my journey were always going to be a guiding force in my life. They were wise enough to help and see where I was, but they were real enough to speak in plain English, keep me out of trouble. Give me some suggestions that I didn't always realize that were wise, helpful suggestions, but I was always smart enough to follow them, or maybe just scared enough to follow them. But that led me down a path later. And then in the later years of my career, those senior non-commissioned officers, really did a lot for me, and as much or more in the early days. And I always found it funny because I would try to explain to people that, if you're a sergeant major or a command sergeant major, that you might salute a second lieutenant out of respect, but it's just like, it's hard to explain to people that they hang with generals and advise generals and lead thousands or tens of thousands of people, and you don't. And they actually are charged with mentoring you as a junior officer. And so that whole relationship's hard to explain to people. I
have learned that, as I share with you, the sergeant major, that they're the real deal.
They are.
And but that had to be a cool lesson, maybe unintended lesson for you in leadership to learn that there are smarter people in the room.
Yeah, for sure. And it's humbling because, at the company level, which is, platoons and companies, the very front lines, that's where everything happens in the military. In fact, there's a great poster that I had. It was some guy stuck in a tree from the 82nd in World War II, and he goes, I don't know what those blankety blanks at platoon were thinking, right? So he's like a squad guy in a squad. So to him, the higher headquarters platoon, which is just like ridiculous high headquarters. It's actually not that high up in the levels. And so, yeah, having that is definitely an insight that you get at an early age in the military. Yeah.
So now you're a second lieutenant and you're moving along. How did you end up transitioning in the military police? How'd that happen?
It just ended up that my hometown reserve unit was military police, and that seemed like a good fit. I wanted to be in Florida, and I knew I'd come back to that at some point. And there was another thing. It was at a time when we were outnumbered by the Soviets, multiple to 1, 10 to 1 or whatever. And so the military police were like the defensive backs, and I was a wide receiver in high school. And so I used to always get crushed by some of the defensive guys, linebackers and people. And so the defensive back related to me because my coach always wanted me to be a defensive back, but I wanted to catch the ball to see if I could do something with it. And so the idea that we were outnumbered and the idea that we were going to go skirmish them and cause them to dismount from their BMPs and mix it up with somebody bigger, because I'm a little guy. So mixing it up with a big guy, being, that way, that appealed to me at that age. And that was my first draw. And then the common sense was, and I could be near home, later. So
you were in a reserve unit in Ocala?
Yeah. 351st MP Company. Shout out to them if anybody's listening. And then there are many other MPs, the 810th MP Company right here in Tampa. I commanded the 810th. And then later I served in many roles and commanded the 317th MP Battalion and did lots of cool stuff there. And went on, to do brigade and then work at the 200th MP Command as a deputy commander. But right here is where I learned everything. Here in Tampa and there in Ocala, foundational years for me.
So you're back in Ocala. Is that, as a reservist, is that where you started your first entrepreneurial deal with cell phones?
No, that came a little bit later. I had some navigating to do, and I went off to work at AT&T and IBM. But it was at the AT&T. It was McCaw Cellular. It got bought. I've worked for AT&T many times, but not always intending to. So, they bought the company that I was with more than once. And so I did the rental.
That's like a bad penny, isn't it? You couldn't get away from it.
Yeah. I love them now. They're good to me now.
Yeah.
I got the same phone number for like 20 years. But basically, when I was getting my master's in business out here at USF, in the executive MBA program, they allowed me to kind of customize my marketing plan. And I was like, well, what if tourists could get phones? And so I thought, airtime now was 50 cents a minute back then. Phones were like $1,000. And if you were at a hotel, it was super expensive, to make a phone call from your hotel. So I set it up so that you could have a phone that you picked up on the way into the park. And it was called Call of the Wild, and I had like these cool graphics. So when you walk into Busch Gardens, there's a little information hut in the beginning, and I was camped out there, and I would rent people phones. And the idea was that it was a jungle in there, right? And you would have the phones, and you could talk, but also you could tell your loved ones, what your phone number was, and they could call you from Brazil or wherever. We get a lot of international tourists. So that was it.
That had to be pretty innovative.
Thanks. I mean, I think it was doing pretty good. The Army had other plans for me, though, and in the middle of my reserve 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer career, they sent me to Haiti for the better part of a year. And so I had to close up shop on the business and got to go do cool stuff there, including helping with the election. I was a logistics and a military police guy. So, we ran the ballot. Well, they ran the election and we helped.
That had to be wild.
It was.
What year was that?
It was 1995.
Yeah, it was going crazy down there.
Yeah, Preval and Aristide. So the MacDill was packed up. The 82nd was going to jump in. It was interesting because there was there were other people that thought they were going to go, and then somebody else ended up going, and it was very confusing in the military, like why people weren't cooperating with the people that were supposed to go. And then one day you see another organization here at MacDill getting all kitted up to go on an airplane. And so anyhow, that got diffused at the last minute, luckily, and it turned into be a very military police focused operation. Worked with the 16th MP Brigade there. They're kind of the elite of the MP world. They're at Fort Bragg. They're super cool guys, and they're very developmental too in my career.
So you spent a year in Haiti?
Yeah.
So that was like vacation, right?
Yeah, well, I came back tan and fit, so I mean, I guess it was all right.
Yeah, the listeners out there, I'm being tongue in cheek. I mean, I appreciate your service, and I know when you were in Ocala thinking you're going to be kind of dialed in with your business, when you joined the reserves, I don't think you planned on all the deployments you were going to end up doing in your career, did you?
No, I didn't. In fact, my buddies, my active duty counterparts, they were a little bit jealous because they were busy doing housekeeping and base work and the less glamorous things. And here I am getting called up for like every deployment, which is pretty much what they were waiting for, right? And so they kept using the other forces as augmentees and other labor pools, if you will. And so got to go to a lot of things, a lot of places, and do a lot of things.
Yeah, the regular guys that were in there all the time, they knew the workings, so they didn't want to deploy them because they still knew how to run all the day-to-day, huh?
In many cases, yeah.
That's really crazy cool. And I'm sure at the time it may have felt however it felt. Well, when we come back into segment 3, we're going to talk about some of that deployment and how this carried you on into your journey of becoming CEO of the Advocate Health Advisors. Again, I'm Dean Akers, your host for the CEO Hour each week. Bringing you top CEOs and entrepreneurs as they share their journeys. And as we go to break, I always want to remind our listeners about the free offer of the CEO Physical. And now we've been offering the 3 Circle Sales Program. So many people reach out to me to hyper grow their sales programs because that's kind of been my career with the companies I've owned and transitioned and stuff. So they reach out for that. So we'll be right back into segment 3 with Darwin Hale, CEO of Advocate Health Advisors.
Helping established CEOs and entrepreneurs. Connect with Dean at deanakers.com. The CEO Hour continues in a moment. Helping to navigate today's marketplace for startups and mainstays. Welcome back to the CEO Hour with Dean Akers.
Well, welcome back to the CEO Hour. I'm your host, Dean Akers, and bringing you top CEOs and entrepreneurs every week that share their journey. This week we have Darwin Hale, the CEO of Advocate Health Advisors. And when we went into the break, Darwin was sharing his journey in the military, which is quite interesting because while we were in the break, he was telling me about one of his majors, Major Maury Dean, that was with the police department in Ocala, right?
Yeah, Major Dean, Morrell Dean. So he was, I don't know if he was a major then. He was a captain maybe when I met him. But in any event, he was a definite mentor to me. And he was also maybe a lieutenant. I'm not sure of his rank in the Ocala Police Department. But he was a guy that he ruled the roost. I mean, he moved up to the battalion when I was a platoon leader. And of all the lieutenants and all the companies, he would pick a few out and help them through. I really resonated with him, what he was thinking and what he was doing. And it was kind of neat because later, when we were going to Bosnia in 97, and I was with IBM, who was very supportive of that, right here in Tampa, the IBM guys over by the stadium, or they used to be right over there, Pavilion Building, Spectrum Building. So we got to do Operation Boss Lift and bring the various leaders of the employers that were supporting us. And so we're all out in our gear doing total operations at Fort Benning, Georgia, getting ready to go overseas. And Maury Dean was there, checking it out. And then he kind of got to see all the companies that he had trained all those years going off to do their mission. And so I have my IBM boss, who I really looked up to, Ed Timmons, and I had a whole bunch of, work support there, had my company, and I was a company commander at this time, and it was pretty cool. And then I had Maury Dean there, who had been a mentor to me and had been a leader in the organization and was now either retired or about to retire. So that was like a really big moment.
Man, your military, your journey in the military, I guarantee if you were to map that out, has been very unique, hasn't it?
Yeah, very unique.
Yeah, and then to have these influencers in your military life that have helped you create disciplines, I'm guessing, and to become a leader. And wow. So, and again, for our listeners out there, when we were in the break, we were talking about, I want you to tell them what your major shared with you about when you joined the reserve. That's what I thought was funny.
Yeah. Well, so Major Dean was pretty wise, and he said, listen, because this was the 80s, right? 12 May 84 is when I commissioned. He said, listen, I know we haven't gone anywhere in a long time, and you might think this is just for college or something. He goes, but you need to take it serious. He goes, we've not had this much peace for this long. Historically, you go somewhere every so many years, and the time is coming. And, it's one of those things where he's right logically, but emotionally, you don't kind of really buy in. And then, I mean, come on, look at what's happened since then, right? I mean, starting in, Just Cause in the late 80s, and then 91 was Desert One, and then it just never stopped and hasn't stopped, right? We called it the spin rate. When I was at the 200th MP Command, we were going every 3 years. A reservist was deploying for a year. It was a 3-to-1 ratio. And it's hard to count because if you count units or you count people, but there was a whole bunch of people going a whole bunch of places for, a long time, every time.
Well, I during that era, like you shared, to be in the reserves, what'd you call it? Every month, once a month, you go. What'd you say?
Well, the old joke was like you go. They had a commercial, and people would, when they heard you were in the reserves, they go, "Oh yeah, 1 weekend a month, 2 weekends, and 2 weeks in the summer." And I got tired of explaining it. I'd be like, "Yep, that's what I signed up for."
That's what you signed up for. And then your major kind of explained that if that happens, you're really you ought to go roll dice in Vegas because you're going to get lucky.
Yeah, for sure.
So now you're in this trajectory. So how did that impact your career? Because if you're going away for a year and coming back, how does that work for the whole growing up in your career, family, all of the above?
Yeah, and that's a really good question because so for me, I'm kind of a peel all your shrimp, get everything just right kind of guy, and then I enjoy my dinner. Like I can't peel one, eat one, right? So I wasn't interested in settling down and having a wife and kids because I didn't think I could honor that commitment. And I always took commitments really serious. Like when I was getting confirmed as a young Catholic boy, I was like, I think I better wait. This is like being an adult in the eyes of God is a big deal. I really want to make sure I don't mess that up. And so I've always taken those things kind of seriously. And so, I didn't really put myself in situations where it would be likely that I would get married and I knew working on my career in corporate America and then going away in the military every so often wasn't, conducive to that. Which worked out great because I have a lovely wife and wonderful kids now, and I'm very active and very much home a lot. Take my kids to school every day, including today. But back then, that was working on the career and building my life. It shaped me because I could be in corporate America, and then I could pop out and go into the military. And because I didn't have the home front necessarily to worry about, I was all in, right? I was either a hardworking, corporate guy working my way up the ladder, or I was a young officer working my way up the ranks. And so having those two perspectives on what you do when it really matters and the intensity that comes with life and death situations and things that inevitably will happen, however, be unlikely, but catastrophic if they do. Versus kind of in the day-to-day where you got lots of time and it's not life and death, yet there are, IBM's some of the best people in the world, right? I had a lot of mentors there and an institution that I was brought into. That was fascinating. And then both of those companies, the military and IBM and AT&T had their peaks and their valleys. And I got to watch some of the highs go low and some of the lows come back up high. So watching leadership, watching, how those cultures worked, IBM was great and then they weren't as great and now they're great again. And so AT&T also went through a process, as did the Army, thanks to Gordon Sullivan and some other people, General Sullivan, I should say. They really transformed the military, and now transformation is afoot again, but it's not the first time.
So is that a lesson for our listeners out there? Is A, there's going to be transformation. B, you maybe become a transformation agent also? Yes.
I think that when I was starting the company, Advocate, I would think, wow, how do I become the up-and-comer? Now, with some degree of success at 15 years, I think, wow, how do you stay in business, right? Because Walmart wasn't always Walmart, right? There was, when I was a kid, Kmart, and there are a whole bunch of other stores you could go to, and we didn't know Walmart. And all of a sudden now they're the big dog, right? So how did they displace all those incumbents, and I think about horses and cars, right? And there's always some sort of a transformation, and there's some time that you need to be thinking about how to innovate, and there's some time when you need to be transitioning out of something. And so what was that movie with Mel Gibson? I actually saw The Real Guy Speak. We were young and we were soldiers. Oh, yeah. Right? What am I thinking about now what am I not thinking about now that I should be thinking about? What am I thinking about that I shouldn't be thinking about? I ask myself those questions all the time.
So that really played out in learning or growing in your corporate world. But to your point, when you're in the military, you're playing with real stuff like life and death. A bad decision there could kill a platoon, not be a quarter's earnings bust.
That's right.
So wow, that's a huge difference. And for our listeners out there, I think that transformation is really key. I laugh because I years ago I was in New York City and I got in a truck. A guy asked me if he wanted to ride into the city, and I said, "What is it?" And he goes, "Oh, it's this great thing, Dean." I go, "What is it?" And he goes, "It's called Uber." It was their second city.
Wow.
And I got the app and I went, "Oh my goodness." So yeah, transformation. So our listeners out there, you've seen that, haven't you?
Yeah, I've seen quite a bit of it. And I look at the healthcare industry itself and I think about transformation. And I look at, so when I was at AT&T, we were looking at, or at IBM, we were at non-computer devices connecting to the internet. And so I got to go out with I remember Coke in particular. And so they had wired up the Coke machines to a wireless modem, and they could actually tell exactly how many cans of each type of soda were in the machine. And the delivery truck was literally like 30% more efficient, right? And you would think that the guy would have an instinct from the machines and he'd just load the truck with the right cases, but it actually really boosted efficiency. And then you'd see other things that you wouldn't think would be common, like the number one reason, I think it was Maytag, the number one reason for the van coming out to the house is, I'll see if you can guess, what's the number one reason a new washer and dryer doesn't work and they call the guy to come out and fix it?
Because it's broken.
It's not plugged in.
Oh, you mean that?
They literally, so at the IBM help desk, step one in problem determination is check the physical connection. People buy stuff, they say it doesn't work, the guy comes, it's not plugged in. So some of the problems to innovate aren't always that innovative, right? They're just really basic. But I got to see at a young age, different industries and different scenarios where innovation, had consequences or not. Like in the Army, we used to say most battles are won or lost before the first soldier hits the ground, right? So the whole thing.
I tell you what, we come back into segment 4. That is spot on, and that's such a business community. That's one of the things I'm going to take away. Most battles are won or lost before the war or battle actually starts. Wow. We'll be back into segment 4 in a few moments, but I want to remind all our listeners about that free offer, the CEO Physical and the 3 Circle Sales Program. It's available at help@adjunctceo.com. That's help@adjunctceo.com. And we'll be right back with Darwin Hale into segment 4, talking about plugged-in washers and whatnot.
Success never takes the weekend off. Connect with Dean at deanakers.com. The CEO Hour continues in a moment.
Growth begins by understanding where you are now. For a limited time, business growth experts at Adjunct CEO will provide a full CEO physical of your business valued at $10,000 for free. Email ceophysical@adjunctceo.com. This offer includes financial, marketing, and sales analysis and an outline to help you strategize future success. For your free CEO physical, email ceophysical@adjunctceo.com. ceophysical@adjunctceo.com. Florida ranks high as a new hub for business growth and innovation. Startups, restarts, and starting over are all part of the new vitality generated as geography and economic opportunity collide. As Florida's entrepreneurial ecosystem grows, many are using Synapse to grow their business. Synapse is a groundbreaking methodology that connects all personas within the innovation economy, utilizing a method that enables all users to progress in meeting their given needs while promoting much-needed community engagement. Never more than now has Florida presented opportunity to be better aligned in business, providing huge potential for greater overall results with strong collaboration and holistic leadership. Synapse is a growth synthesis platform that will allow you to take advantage and flourish in ways you never thought possible as an entrepreneur, as a business, and within the context of community, events, connections, publishing, all with Synapse. See for yourself at synapsefl.com. That's synapsefl.com.
Helping your business succeed in today's marketplace. Welcome back to the CEO Hour with Dean Akers.
Well, welcome to segment 4. I'm your host, Dean Akers, again bringing you the CEO Hour. Every week, top CEOs and entrepreneurs share the journey. I'm stuttering this today because I'm so blown away by Darwin's epic story. This is a great story to me. When I was researching you and stuff, I would have had no idea that this was part of your journey. The military, I knew you were in the military, but the going in and out and the career shifts and the finding innovation and the things you've learned along your way. So now how did this whole real entrepreneurship deal start 15 years ago?
Yeah, well, I think it's never one particular thing, right? But I would attribute it back to the fact I've always been entrepreneurial, right? I've always just had that dream. And because of the military, I would also say that I knew I wasn't going to be the, CEO of AT&T, right? So as a young guy, you think, I remember I wanted to be a senator. So I got a job with a senator's office. I worked for Bob Graham. And I learned about healthcare working for him, and I thought I'll just work my way up and I'll be a senator. But that actually isn't how it works. So So in any event, I was working my way up the ladder, but I realized I wasn't going to be an officer in the company, because if you're going away for a year at a time, you're not doing the things that the leadership of the company needs. And now the nation's work is important, but as a shareholder, you got to respect what AT&T and IBM shareholders need too. And so that senior leadership opportunity was less likely. And then because I was the healthcare director for AT&T and I wrote their healthcare strategy, I had a really good vision of the country and where it was going from a healthcare perspective. And lo and behold, my mom turned 65, like in the middle of all this. And so I went to help her, and I couldn't make heads or tails out of Medicare. I'm like, man, this is some crazy stuff. And I was, feeling pretty good, right? I got a corner office. I got an MBA now. I'm like a major in the Army Reserves. And I thought, wow, if this is kind of walloping me, then I'm going to have to, give it some thought. And so I called an Army buddy who, Nick, and he was also an insurance guy. And so I trusted him, though. We sat at the kitchen table. We figured it all out, kind of made a good game plan. And that's when I knew there was an opportunity. And it took a few more years to play out. But realizing I wasn't going to move up the ranks there, and I had this other opportunity, I jumped. And I jumped at a really crazy time, because I finally did get married and I had my son. I remember vividly in Minneapolis, because I moved up there for a promotion at AT&T, I had my son in one arm and my Florida insurance manual in the other. And I'm reading the thing, and it was crazy. And there's one other funny story that goes with that I just remembered is, each promotion in the Army is a really big deal. I remember when I got promoted to lieutenant colonel, and it was right after my son had come home from the hospital, and I hadn't been, to the ceremony yet, but I got the piece of paper that tells you. I'm like, oh, honey, I have, good news here. And we had the baby, on the floor, Max, my son, Darwin Hale. And I hand her this thing expecting some sort of pat on the back, and she goes, that's great. And she threw it down. She goes, now hand me a diaper.
Yeah, your priorities changed.
And my whole world in that moment shifted forever, for the better. But it was just kind of like that whole thing just got cast aside, and it epitomized my future.
I have 5 sons, but 2 of my sons have children.
Good for you.
And I love going out to breakfast with them and stuff, and with my grandchildren, and they go, Dad, you know what happened? I go, really? That happened to you? You're probably the only person that ever happened to. You're right. The diaper becomes a priority. We got to go save the country. Hand me a diaper, please. Right. Darwin, I need a diaper. So now you're in Minneapolis. What got you back to Florida? Your mom's situation?
Yeah, no, ironically, it was, that helped, but my wife's parents had bought some land, and we bought in the area in an investment. And so at the time I was starting the company, the real estate bubble burst, and we were in the epicenter down there in not South Florida, but Sarasota County and that whole area. And so we owned something. I'm like, well, I'm not going to have 2 mortgages. I'm not going to do that. And so we moved and we lived there, and we ended up starting the company there. We could have done it anywhere in Florida, but that's how we actually got there. And her parents lived there, and we wanted to be close to them. And one thing led to another. Now we have roots there, and so we actually live in that area.
Well, my final segment, I always like this. We've got about 5 or 6 more minutes, but I really like, first off, this has been an incredible journey. And thank you for your service, and thank you for all the craziness you endured. And now you have a family with a son.
And 2 daughters. Yeah,
2 daughters. Oh my!
Morgan, Max, and Mia.
Yeah, jumped right in.
Nice tight shot group. 10, 12, and 14.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. And so now you have a family. You've started the company. It was the impetus with your mother. Tell us some of the pieces you've really now, as you nurture your thoughts, as you have time, that you would want to share to an entrepreneur or somebody that you did learn along your way, and especially with your company, that would be a takeaway for them. If you were sitting with your son now, he's now 21 to 25. With what you've learned, is there any tidbit you want to give our listeners here in this final segment that you think could help them?
Well, I think everybody would say hard work, right? But I don't want to skip that, because I was never the smartest kid in my class. I was, rarely the very best. Most things didn't come easy to me, so I had to work at them. And so hard work is like a really big deal. And so I don't want to like skip over hard work. But I would say in addition to hard work, you have to really believe it. You know, you get your MBA and you go to these places and they tell you the probabilities are against you. But there are so many inefficiencies out there where if you just really believe what you're doing and you're going about it in a commonsensical way and you can articulate why this thing is better than that thing. I mean, Henry Ford got competition by, I think it was General Motors. Because why? Because they didn't let it just be in black, right? It was a color. Like, wow, that was a differential advantage, a sustainable and differential advantage. So I think as an entrepreneur, if you know what you bring that's different to the marketplace and what makes you better than the others, be true to that. But you got to champion it. Because I got on a plane one day. We needed something done in New York. The guy wouldn't call me back. There was no logical reason to get on the plane other than sheer will. And I flew up there. He wasn't in the city. He wasn't in Albany where he was supposed to be. He was in Maine, of all places. I ended up driving back to the city, getting a flight to Boston, which I had no idea that Maine was so far from Boston at the time because I'm from Florida. And, and then I drove and I got to see a lot of the Northeast because I drove all the way from Boston to Maine. And I got a table and I camped out at the end of the stairwell. The guy thought I was stalking him. He had like a little fear in his eyes when he walked downstairs. But I'm like, hey, I've been trying to get a hold of you. So, I found him in Maine. And so having that determination and just that inner strength that said, I know that this is going to work and I'm going to make it work. And even if you're afraid and you're fearful, like turning that into things that will make it work, getting up with my wife at 11 o'clock because we're mad about something. We had a rule that said, hey, if you talk about it more than 5 minutes, you got to get up and do something about it. And so we would get up and we would stuff envelopes and flyers, instead of griping about whatever we were griping about. And those, to me, those are the takeaways. The hard work, but having that belief and that conviction, because that's contagious, and that is key.
So my takeaway is to really go at this thing with intent.
That's a better way to say it.
I mean, you just can't let stuff stop you, can you?
You can't.
I love the story of getting on the plane and going up and not sitting there and just, so many people are hiding behind emails because they won't answer my email. By the way, when we have lunch, I'm going to tell you you and I are more kindred spirit between Ocala and all these other crazy. But that intent thing that's just, say that again about what you did in Maine. Because to go after a guy like that, that's a closing tip I want everybody to know, because I totally agree.
Yeah, well, I will. And in the Army, it's commander's intent, right? So if you have nothing else, you follow the commander's intent. It's one paragraph of what to do if everything else goes crazy. In this case, though, in the main story, I couldn't get in front of the person I needed to see to get the decision that I needed to get, which was to staff a whole bunch of Walmarts in the Northeast. And so I literally flew up to see him so I could just resolve the issue, handle his objections or concerns. There was nobody better than us to do the job. And I made my way via New York City, Manhattan, Albany, Boston into his hotel and camped out at 6 a.m., waited for him to come down to breakfast and continued the dialogue, got the sale.
Darwin, thank you for coming on today. This has been epic. And I know our listeners out there are going to leave with this whole message of intent. And you have a disciple, because I totally agree with you. The people that are sitting there that don't get on that airplane and fly up to meet with them and then blame whatever they want to blame. What a tip to close this show with today is that story. And that story will resonate with me forever, because I love it. And I know our listeners love it. And so all our listeners out there, if you're a CEO or you're an entrepreneur, don't sit around there waiting to do it. Go do it, right?
Yeah. Again,
Darwin, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
This is Dean Akers, again, bringing you top CEOs every week. We had Darwin Hale today with us, the CEO of Advocate Health Advisors, sharing his quite epic story. And to leave with this tip of intent for each of you is an incredible takeaway. And when you're driving down the road today, trying to figure out what you want to do, just remember that the CEO Hour is going to bring you these sharp CEOs every week that share their journey. And this week it was all about intent. Have a great week.
Thanks for listening to this CEO Hour with Dean Akers, helping businesses and CEOs succeed in today's marketplace. Receive a free CEO physical when you connect with Dean at deanakers.com. That's deanakers.com. And join us again next week for the CEO Hour with Dean Akers.